So I think my task is to, I think this is right, is to help us to process what's happened and to think about what we're going to do next and what you plan to do next. Brian Stevenson, who's the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, which is in Alabama, it works on prisons and racial justice. He talks about building memorials to lynchings. I know, the first time I heard it, that was a horrible idea. That's just not a memorial I'd want to visit. But he talks about it as in public parks, places that you'd visit, just like he says you'd see a guy on a horse in most parks. From some battle of conquest or another, you'd see a plaque or a sculpture of some kind, a sign of our true history as a nation, the stuff that we literally whitewash as a people. So I was a chaplain for 7 years at Columbia, where the stained glass behind the altar, what we stood in front of every single Sunday, is actually Paul's fail speech. It's Paul in Athens. And I have to say, it felt like permission when I realized what it actually was, and I had to think about why anybody would put that behind the altar instead of the Christ victorious, which is what most of us get to see and could not at all aspire to. I had something I could actually do. I could do that no problem. I could go all out and not count the cost and probably not have much to count for it afterwards. So how do we go out into the world with Jesus, and what are the images that we carry? We in the church have the great honor of inviting everyone to an ancient tradition of Christian practice. And to be truthful, that's really all we have to offer to the world. It's a lot, and that's sort of it. That practice is about self-realization, but ultimately it is just a practice. We can be changed by it, as the first disciples were, and as Jesus himself was, and the church itself will be changed by our going out. And we have heard today and yesterday, and we learn from the Gospels, that the work of God is visible in the highways and the byways. Not that Jesus went out to those places because that would have been a really neat illustration, but that's actually where God was at work in the world, literally on the margins of societies and among the people for whom the rules of society just weren't working. The truth is that the rules of society, or the way that we are all told that things are supposed to work, don't actually work for any of us. This is one of the great secrets that the church should just be telling the world. We can proclaim it. Things go wrong. Things go wrong for our families and our communities. It's absolutely inevitable. We all figure it out pretty early in life, actually. If you go back to your earliest memories of when things have just gone wrong, they're pretty early, I think. For most, they are for me. It's what we decide to do with that information that makes us receptive to the message of the gospel or not at all. We tell ourselves stories and organize our lives into stories that make sense. That's what it means to be human. Sense-making is what our brains do to keep us all going. We build a story of self, and when we cannot, when trauma is too much or our resources are too little, we crack. We literally break, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, or all of the above. The truth is, within these stories that work pretty well for most of us, there are cracks as well. And this is where we need healing or redemption. They're not mistakes that shouldn't have happened to good Christian people. This is living, and this is where Christ can be at work in our lives. And this is where the work of evangelism meets our own lives. The thing about the gospel, what we've been hearing these last 2 days, is it's not a new pile of information to pour into an old wound. It isn't like rubber cement and a blister or caulk and a crack. Those are good things, but it's much more profound than that, the healing that comes through Christ. We use the image of baptism in the pools and waters of baptism. So my guy these days is M.M. Thomas. I won't tell you what the M and the M stand for. The teaching I could give you about South Indian names is when there are initials, just accept it. You don't want to go any further than that. So he coined a term in the 60s or 70s, I think maybe even the late 50s. He's seen as sort of a precursor of some kinds of liberation theology. And his Christology was called a Christology of humanization. It's a new category. And there's a lot of work like this at the time. So in Christology, when we do it, or in the category of incarnation in systematic theology, if you're a Roman Catholic in the Western Church, we usually talk about the divinization of humanity in the incarnation of Jesus, right? That humanity, who we are, becomes sacred and holy again in the appearance and the life of Jesus. The mundane and the ordinary are re-sanctified. It's good stuff. It becomes sacred again. or realizes its sanctity in the restoration of creation, that is the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. That's Roman language. Thomas says it's more useful to call it humanization. He says the problem is not that we don't recognize the sacredness in one another. The risk is that we always will decide what is sacred. We know what we think is sacred and not sacred, and not always in human living, right? We will always create ideals, and we will always exclude in some way. He writes that humanization means learning to see and love one another in our humanity, that the actual being human part, he doesn't say this, but I think he means like the snot and the blood parts, the inconsistencies and the embarrassments, the great unexpected diversities, it is in that Jesus comes to reclaim and restore our relationship to that. That itself is good, our humanity. He writes that when so many human beings are left to live inhumanely by forces under the control of humans, labor markets, racism, the justice system, all of those principalities and powers that drive us away from one another, that God in Jesus restores humanity for the eyes of humanity. God does not make us anything other than what we already are, what we were made in creation to be. And so if we are to go out into the world and share this good news, ultimately it is the good news of our own salvation, the healing of our own wounds, the recalibration of our being in light of our humanity, and the humanity of the communities that we belong to and the neighborhoods that we walk in, all of humanity. It is in this renewal that we go out to act as Christians. One of the great moments in the debate of the evangelicals, and get this, the formalists. I didn't go to an Episcopal seminary, so this was news to me when I first encountered this. Not the high church party, but the formalists, right? Yeah, you all know that. I didn't know this. Bishop Hobart, who is the rector of Trinity Church and the Bishop of New York, argued against the formation of the American Bible Society, as you do. He worried. Talk about being on the wrong side of history, God bless him. And he was a great bishop, a great missionary bishop. But he wrote that he worried that in losing the ritual, and it's called formalism for a reason, and we still do this in New York, we live in this more than in the high church, that the uniqueness of our denomination as Episcopalians would be lost. So he's a bishop in the new church, but this is something we still live with today, and it's part of what we're talking about and what it means to be missional. It's why we even need this strange word, formalism. The uniqueness of our identity as Episcopalians. This is actually what we're wrestling with right now. So, he wasn't, again, he's a lovely guy, but what a line to find, right? The Bible, in his understanding, was too much of an equalizer and dangerous in the hands of ordinary people. It is, he was right. So this is illustrated, really unfortunately for him, and again, great guy, right? In the debate, right? Or so we say in New York, yeah. Illustrated in the debate on abolition, God bless him. He was against doing it too quickly, which actually is a surprise if you know his history at all. He was a mentor of Peter Williams, the founding priest of the African Church of St. Philip in Manhattan, now in Harlem. But in a correspondence with William Jay, and this is well documented in other conversations as well, William Jay is of the great Jay family, the politicians like John Jay, an Episcopal layman, and an evangelical in this new movement called evangelicalism within the church overall and in the Episcopal Church. He was a founder of the American Bible Society, and he was an abolitionist. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of those among white Episcopalians at this time. And so he and Hobart, the great missionary bishop, are in an argument. Jay says abolition immediately. Hobart says we don't well enough understand the implications. He meant the property implications, the economic implications, the implications for trade with England of abolition. It would have been a rash decision of untold economic consequences. It's interesting, right, that these two things line up for him, and I think they're very connected about the power of this text, which, again, before this time, would not have been in the hands of ordinary Christians. It is not the tradition that we come from, that from 5 or 20 or 100, that Christians have been reading this text. So it's quite an innovation that's coming forward, and he's absolutely opposed to it. But it's also how we talk about political situations today, what Hobart did, right? It's how we talk about Israel and Palestine. Do we understand the implications? The justice system, jails, reparations, famine, desertification, borders, migrants. Do we understand the implications of the humanity of all the people that we're talking about? We don't. William Jay says, and that's not the issue. Bishop Hobart says, be careful. It's interesting. It's a debate that's been going on in our church for a really long time. So I think there's a really strong link between these two ideas. Evangelicalism, the idea of the Spirit unleashed among us in the Word, and believing in human freedom, despite the consequences to the established order. And we are part of the established order. It's what Thomas is talking about, and it's what the speakers have been driving us towards for about 24 hours. So I'm supposed to wrap up what they've done, but I'm not sure that's really possible. So I don't want to be like those celebrants, and you all know them, and I know this has probably happened to most of you, those ones that get up at the announcements and undo your prophetic sermon by softening it up with that halftime roundup. I'm not going to do that. So what I want you to do, though, is to sit still and to consider. So if you're at camp, this is the altar call part, right? Take a minute to sit and consider what you've heard. Don't worry about what you don't remember. What you remember is what you're supposed to remember. I'll say a couple of the words that were said just to help you bring up what's happened over the last day. But consider what your body remembers, what you remember, what images you remember, what songs you remember, as you begin to reflect on what you want to take from this. If you like to close your eyes, do what makes you comfortable. Here's some of the words that were said. God is loving the world into wholeness. Apostolic Catholicity in the vernacular. God's mission is in progress. What is in our DNA? Cross boundaries. The Spirit is on the loose. The beautiful mess. If you've missed Sunday, you've missed everything. Be dependent upon the hospitality of others. Hold a space. Shake the dust off your feet. We fail. We make the church we need. Some of us have never been franchised. What do you measure? Yes, and. So, of course, we take these words and this charge, and we align them with our own stories. And if we don't do this work of aligning with our own stories, however mundane you think your story is, and it's not, we don't do the self-critical work that makes us effective. Some people are really good at this stuff, and some people aren't, and that's all it is. That literally is all it is self-awareness. Those people that irritate you for their cockiness and arrogance, and the ones that break your heart, the only division between that, the only space, is self-awareness. And it can feel self-absorbed, but we need to take our time with our own stories. So besides M.M. Thomas, my guy, I've been obsessed with stepwells. This is a picture of a stepwell for the last year. And I'm not a good enough speaker to not talk about the thing I'm obsessed with. So I'm obsessed with these. A stepwell, if you haven't heard of them, they're in India. They might be in West Asia and other parts of West Asia that are very dry. And I think the oldest ones are probably from the 1100s, maybe a little bit earlier. The idea is that it doesn't rain often enough, so you've got to create some spaces to deal with that. So lakes is how we deal with that in Texas, where I come from. I think the most man-made lakes in the United States are in Texas. So it's the same idea, but a long time ago. So you start in a well, you dig a hole. That's what we have in Kerala because we have a lot of water. So when we have a well, you see a pool of water or you see a hole with a rope. That's what we recognize as wells. When you go to parts of North India, and it starts as low as in Karnataka, which is really far south, far north for me, but far south for India, you see things like this. This is just looking down into a well, and you can see how it's carved, right? It's quite intricate and beautiful. So the more modest are like these, and the reason they're called step wells is as the water recedes, you've got to get down in there. And there's so little water in the community that it's not enough to have a bucket. You'd be there all day trying to raise, if everybody is trying to use a bucket or 2 or 3 or 4 or 20. Instead, you can literally walk down into these wells. It's like walking into your baptismal pit, really, and get down to the level that you need to get water. So people go down the stairs. I did it once. The first time I saw one of these, I was an adult, and I kind of confidently walked down as all the other people were confidently walking down, and very soon realized it was really slippery. There was no handrail, and I wasn't really sure how I was supposed to get back out. I had vertigo under the earth, which I didn't know was a thing. So you need people to help with this, but this is a deep, deep space that you can see. And you can see that rooms have been carved out a little bit, right? You can go into this space, and the idea is that it all stores water, right? You can go, it fills up, and when it is a rainy season, all you see is something that looks like a pond or maybe a small lake. But as the water recedes, I think what you see is that people have been there before, creative and talented and interesting people. And when it starts to get really, really scary, and it's gone really low, and there hasn't been rain for a long time, what you see is that people have been there before as well, and left a story for you. And it's not just that kind. That's a well. When that fills up, it looks like a lake, like a big pond, as we might say in Texas. That's all, you can see where the trees are, that's above ground. All the rest of that is underground. When I first saw it, I thought someone had imposed an Escher image on top of it, right? I didn't think it was real. That's a real thing. You can visit that, and you can walk down to the bottom, and it's green at the bottom because that's where that's the level of the water. So as we've gone through these droughts, people are actually getting to the bottom of these things. It's just spectacular. What an image for baptism. So when you get down, this is inside one of them. Do you see that? To me, it's like making a stained glass window of Paul in Athens. Like, that isn't necessarily a time you want to remember. It wasn't one of the highlights. But there it is, behind the altar at Columbia University, actually telling the story exactly of what it means to try to proclaim the gospel at Columbia University. It's exactly right. And they would not have known that in 1895 when they built it, I don't think, but they nailed it. And I think what these things do in times when people should have been desperate, walking off, I think probably to long distances to go find their water or to do something else, they carved these beautiful things in anticipation of the time when the rain would come. And there's no way that these things were done in times of prosperity because you couldn't get down there. The reason you could do this work is that they were distraught, they were broken, they couldn't control the forces of nature that they needed to survive. And that as part of the human experience to actually mark that place, and to mark it so beautifully and to prepare it for the time when abundance would come, is so beautiful, right? What a story of faith. We have them in our tradition as well, but we don't tell them. We tell our win stories. We tell the stories of everything working out perfectly. What's the trajectory that you took to become the rector of Trinity Wall Street, right, is what you ask Bill Lupfer. Or how'd you become a bishop? Why do you look happy and you're still a priest, right? That must have been a positive, easy story. But actually, the truth is, we wrestle with ourselves, with the institution, with our faith, and with all of those in community around us to discern where God is at work in the world. And I like to think that it's like, I love the idea of having baptismal fonts that are full of these caverns. The lower you go, the harder you go, you see the rich, rich story of those who have come before us. This is a part of what context is. And the reason I think people like you that care about context get a lot of grief for it, for being trendy or something else, people like you and me, is because I think people can't believe that there's this kind of beauty in paying attention to the world around us. So context, it's easy for someone like me to see context in someone like me because I don't come from here. So this is the sliva, the cross for the Marthama Church in India. So the Indians, like all good church people, we're a very, very small minority in India. We're 2% of the population. But as I say, 2% of the population of India is a lot of people. That's us. So we're an enormous church. And of course, we're factioned off into many, many denominations. That's not just a problem of the West. But this image is the cross of the Marthama Church. It is an Orthodox cross. You see it flowers on its arms. It is sitting on a lotus, and there's a dove coming at it from the top, as one does. This is the breakdown of it. It's not the best slogan, but I like to think it sounds better in Malayalam than it does in English. But the lotus image in that, and the lamp, and the wheel, are Indian, right? So in the Marthama Church in India, nobody would say, unless you really push them, that those are Indian images. They feel like Christian images to them. There is a cross. It's a Buddhist wheel. We would have probably been Buddhist when we were converted to Christianity, as our self-understanding, and that's why you had that in the center. We have a flowered cross because we are Syrian. We are from the Syrian Orthodox Church, and that is a cross that you often see in the Syrian rite that we observe. You see a diya lamp, which in India, again, Indian Christians would say is clearly the symbol of Jesus, the light that's come, but nobody but us would say that that is the symbol of Jesus, because the diya is the light that you see in Diwali, right? It's an Indian lamp that you put on a table. It's the lamp that you light literally for Diwali. You hope you are guiding Ram and Sita home after the end of the great battle. This is for all of us to light their way home, has been adopted as the light of Christ in the world that we all carry in our hearts and in our home. It fits perfectly. And the lotus, and I would actually say we don't have anything like the lotus in the Christian tradition. I wish we did. So the only thing that we have like the lotus is Jesus. The lotus is a gorgeous symbol for Jesus. Lotuses, as you all know, it's why we all love them, grow in mud and sludge. My aunts all have them, but they have them in the ditch or pool that they built beside the house where the water drains from the roof. It's for wastewater. And if you have a wastewater thing, you can't use it for anything but washing up outside, cleaning up your driveways or sidewalks. And lotus grows in it, because lotus grow in mud and filth. They grow in smelly places, and they're spectacular, right? The color is amazing. It is a gorgeous image of resurrection life within this context that has no context for Jesus or crucifixion or Rome. Rome never got to India. I can talk about imperial power. I can do an empire-critical analysis of the text in Kerala, and people are sort of with you because of Britain, sorta, but there really wasn't crucifixion in that story, really. But the lotus is an understood symbol, and it actually tells the Jesus story quite profoundly, right? Out of waste, out of those who are the least, out of the places where nothing good can come, emerges the most beautiful thing that we can imagine, which is the lotus, which is actually held up as the most beautiful image. And this is what it looks like when it's done in a slightly nicer and fancier way. So context. Context is where you and I come from, and you have a story like that, we all do, and it's worth the great searching. Everything I've just shown you would not fly in a PowerPoint in Kerala. People would think, when I first asked what a stepwell was, because I saw one, and asked what it was for, it was a big hole with stairs that went down. People looked at me like I was crazy. Basically, what kind of idiot wouldn't know that that's for what? What else would you do with that, right? But isn't that the key to context? That we have among ourselves images and stories so rich and inspiring that they inspire and frame the communities around us. And we don't use them. We have the ones in our text, and they're amazing, but we have them around us as well. And they often illustrate, as has been said over and over and over, a depth or offer a depth or insight to our experience that we wouldn't have been able to pull up otherwise. So I invite you to it, that we are invited to go out, and we are critical of the institutions that don't work, and we live on the margins of them, some of us more than others. But we also have a great richness because of exactly where we are in the communities we serve, and we are asked to look critically and deeply and claim them. So I'll leave you with this image. This is another well. Guys, this is a well. You should go visit these. They're amazing. There's a danger that they will be covered up in some parts of India soon because they're in urban centers and people have better use for their space than a big hole in the ground. But these, talk about a legacy of resilience that you can't make up and you can't actually tell without the image. The church is like that. We invite people into things like this. We have resources and practices that are that gorgeous and unexpected and essential. So there are pipes now, of course, in India, and you can get water in other ways. You don't need things like this. But don't you want to live in a world where there are things like this, right? Don't you want to tell these stories? Well, we do. You and I do. And I hope you'll claim the ones that are for you. The kingdom of God has come near you, we heard. The dream of God, the reign of God's justice, mercy, and compassion is at hand. That means it's right now. Thanks be to God. Friends, offer to God a sacrifice of praise and make good your vows to the Most High.